That includes Republican Congressman and Air Force veteran Adam Kinzinger, who flew missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. And Congressman Kinzinger is here with us now. Welcome.
Thanks.
You say you were sickened when you read the president's tweet last night. Explain why.
You know, it's a couple of things. There's nothing wrong with negotiating. Every war in history ends in some kind of a negotiation. Where I've been very concerned in this process is the idea that the negotiation, success, quote unquote, is simply having the Taliban talk to the Afghan government. There actually needs to be a peace deal between them that's enforceable. But I think what really is beyond that and really struck me in really disbelief is the idea that Taliban leaders in the week of 9/11, but even beyond that, Taliban leaders were going to come to really the area in the United States not too far from New York, Camp David, has been a place of such wonderful things that have happened in the past. Negotiations between nation states can happen there, but a terrorist organization that doesn't recognize nation states, that kills innocent women and children, that denies women the right to really even be in the same room as their husbands is just a minor part of the terrible things that they do. To have them at Camp David is totally unacceptable. The president did the right thing by walking away. I'm very concerned, though, that we were really close to having Taliban leaders there.
And to be clear, CNN's reporting is that the White House is still trying to find a date and time to perhaps have this kind of a negotiation in the future.
Again, nothing wrong with the negotiation, but the president should not be negotiating with these really evil people. We can't forget what they did. We can't forget what they continue to do. And I think, we're at a moment where Americans, they think about terrorism, but it doesn't seem like an imminent threat. And there's a reason for that. It's not because terrorists have gone away. It's not because their desires have gone away. But it's because we fight them over there now. We are sending our fierce U.S. military, these men and women that raise their right hand to protect and defend us. We're sending them over there to do the fighting there so we don't have to do them in the streets of America. I'd love if terrorism went away. I'd love if we could walk away from this fight. We can't, though, because you may not be interested in war, but war may be interested in you. And that's the case when it comes to terrorism.
I mean, think about this. 16 U.S. soldiers killed in Afghanistan so far in 2019. Even after the 15th death, the president was willing to bring in the Taliban for the first time ever to Camp David. On the 16th death, though, he's tweeting to tell us about this secret meeting no one knew about and drawing a line now. What do you make of that?
I don't know. I don't know if there's more to the story or not. Again, I think the president made the right decision, absolutely, by canceling them coming. They never should have been coming in the first place. But I think, keep in mind this, we're engaged in a war in Afghanistan. The president has said a number of times, it's almost like a peacekeeping operation. But this has prevented Afghanistan. I'd love to see them much further along. This has prevented them from becoming another safe haven for terrorism, the Taliban from resurging, from ISIS from even getting a stronger foothold there, as well as Al-Qaeda. This is going to be a long generational fight. I wish it was a microwave war where we could be over in a week, but it's going to be generational. And when we forget that, we're only going to have to make sure then that the next generation is going to have to do the same fighting. Right now, this is the first war where a father and a son can be a veteran of the same theater. And if we pull out and watch that resurge again without a peace deal that's enforceable, it's only going to be the next generation having to do the fighting again.
As someone who served in Afghanistan yourself, how do you think the troops on the ground are feeling right now about these new developments?
I think probably a little confused. But they're fierce people. They're going to go do what they're asked to do. They'll leave if they're asked to leave. They'll stay and fight if they're asked to stay and fight. Nobody wants to be there. I don't know any member of the military that enjoys being in Afghanistan or Iraq for that matter, but they know what their nation calls on them to do. We have a generation. Every civilization is a generation of heroes away from extinction, and this is our generation of heroes that are willing to do what the vast majority of Americans aren't, and God bless them for being willing to do it.
You've expressed skepticism in the past of negotiations with the Taliban, really from the get-go. You're saying, there are circumstances in which you would support those negotiations, but I just wonder, if you can't trust the Taliban and you're expressing concern that if the U.S. pulls out, that we're going to lead to a similar situation that we saw previously when the U.S. has pulled out early. How does the U.S. then get out of Afghanistan? What should be the goal? What would tell you there's enough stability to bring the troops home?
You know, I mean, it'll be, when you have to see it, you'll know. And the bottom line is this. I think you have to have a ceasefire that's lasting between the Taliban and the Afghan government. The Taliban have to agree that the Afghan government has a right to exist, and they can run maybe for political office in that future government, you know, as you see some cases where terrorist organizations become political forces. But to say, you know, that we're going to leave and that condition is just simply that the two are going to talk, Afghanistan and the Taliban government, or the Taliban are going to talk, is not going to be in any way enforceable, and they will resurge. And they've always had this saying, we've all heard it, where they say America has the watches, but we have the time. The only way the United States will ever be defeated is by defeating our will, because we win these fights. But if we defeat our will and we determine that it's time to just go away because we're tired, that generation after World War II was exhausted, but they stayed in Europe and ultimately defeated the Soviet Union. We can't act like we're tired right now. We have to continue to press this fight to victory.
Before I let you go, as we were discussing in our last segment, there's a new GOP primary challenger for Trump in 2020, Mark Sanford, former congressman from South Carolina. That makes 3 now. Are you okay with states like South Carolina canceling their Republican primaries?
No, you know, I know Mark Sanford well. I like him as a friend. Trump's going to win the primary. I think every state should have a primary. Let people have their voices heard. That's a very American thing. And in the party, if there's people that want to vote against President Trump, it'll be their opportunity, and then they'll all unite behind him in the general. But yeah, I think canceling a primary, it just sends a bad message, and it takes away people's right to be heard.
Does Trump have your vote in 2020?
Yeah, he will.
Okay, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thanks so much for being here.
You bet. See ya.